They say you rise and fall on habits, you rise and fall on relationships. But one of the things that you most definitely rise and fall on is leadership. Today, we're going to be spending some time discussing leadership so as to ensure that you understand the importance of leadership and how it can really help you to leapfrog your efforts to success. We will also be looking at performance management because at the end of the day, whether you are a rising star in business, a mid level entrepreneur, or a top entrepreneur, performance management plays a very vital role in the whole ecosystem of moving your business forward. Today, I have a very dynamic personality in studio that will be joining me to be part of this conversation, and it's no other than Tony. So I want to encourage you to join me in welcoming Tony Raghunathan. And in the event that you've never heard about Tony, I want to say that he's a specialist in performance management and also a specialist in emotional intelligence, both of which I believe is so vital when you want to achieve optimum performance in the workforce and in your personal life. Tony, welcome. Always great to have you here, my friend.
Thanks, Gary. Good to be here as usual.
Awesome. Today, I want us to talk about leadership and performance management. And I want to just kick it off by looking at leadership. But today, I just don't want to talk about any leadership. I mean, we can talk about democratic leadership and autocratic leadership and paternalistic leadership and the role that they all play in the management ecosystem and optimizing performance. The leadership that I really want to talk about today is what I call the proactive leader. To me, they have a certain, spin to it, and I want to get into it. So at the end of the day, you understand what is performance management, what is proactive leadership, what exactly is proactive leadership. Proactive leadership stands on three important pillars. One, it helps you to think ahead. Two, it helps you to see beyond problems. And three, it helps you to take informed action to achieve desired results. And I do believe that to be successful is not an accident. To be successful, if you can think ahead, it's an indication that you are proactive because you're not waiting for a situation to present itself to start to examine the possibilities for success. You're training the mind to think ahead. And let me give an example of what I'm talking about. I could recall a few years ago, I was going to buy a piece of performing assets. Let me call it performing asset. The value of the performing asset at cash price is $2.5 million. Now, if I didn't get it at the cash price, I would have had to pay an additional $500,000. So the cash price 2.5 million. If you allow it to run for 12 to 24 months, I would have had to pay $3 million. Now, in my mind, I'm not going to pay an additional $500,000 for the product. So how do I organize myself? How do I apply the concept of proactive leadership to that exact situation? So what I did, I said, okay, I have 6 months to pay off for this item. And my game plan is going to be that I'm going to make one upfront $1 million deposit to the item. And over the next 5 months, I'm going to deposit $200,000, which is going to give me a sum total of $1 million. And in the last month, the 6th month, I'm going to pay $500,000. So what has happened there? I have done a mental calculation. I think ahead as to how I'm going to offset the cost of the performing asset within the timeline so as to reduce or save $500,000 on that project. That for me is part of the process of thinking ahead. You can't wait until you reach the 5th month or the 6th month and say, I didn't come up with a game plan. You need to think ahead about all of this. So thinking ahead means that you have worked out these different, maneuver to save on your investment portfolios, to save on your expenses. Now, that is thinking ahead. The next element here is where we call seeing beyond the problem. Now, what exactly is seeing beyond the problem? Now, what I've learned also is that very often, you set a goal, this is what I want to do, but things tend to go wrong. All right. What if your game plan to make monthly payments of $200,000 towards that income producing asset, something interrupted? What's going to happen there? It's going to affect you. So performance management is going to be undermined if that traditional income source is dried up. All right, if something goes wrong there. So in thinking ahead, what I've done, I've ensured that one, you have a sustainable source of income to help you reach that financial obligation. And in thinking ahead again, I also identify another source of income that I could have gone to and immediately offset that debt by the end of that 6 months life cycle, so as to prevent paying the additional $500,000 for that income producing asset. I am going through this to basically just create a clear picture of how you apply proactive leadership. Is that you think ahead, you see beyond the problems, and then you take informed action to achieve the desired results. And in my context here, what I've seen, the kind of excitement that you gain, I mean, that you have saved $500,000 on a debt portfolio. And if you did not reach that performance requirement, you would have to pay that additional sum of $500,000. And that's a whole lot of money to go down the drain. Now, I want to put to the audience, your thoughts of the importance of leadership and performance management in the context of influencing desired results. But as you guys begin to look at the issue, I want you to think about this, because what I see happens very often. As leaders, sometimes you find yourself in a situation, and you find yourself in that situation because you tend to be reactive as against being proactive. I don't know in your experience if you find that a lot of situations that people find themselves in is because they are more reactive as against being proactive. I am saying that we need a culture where we are nurturing people to be proactive thinkers, proactive leaders, who are trained to see processes and how to leverage those processes to their advantage. I'm going to pause here and just have you guys chime in here a little bit. I've not said a lot. Elmer, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Hey, Elmer.
All right. All right. Well, today we're looking at performance. We're looking at leadership and performance management. And you can chime in on that topic after Tony. But I would love to hear your thoughts in terms of, performance management. I will ask you some specific points so you can speak to that. Tony, all to you.
Yeah, and well, you said a lot there, and one of the things that always stand out when you're looking at leadership is leaders have to have a big picture view of everything. Just like you had a big picture view of everything that you needed to do, that is important. But what aligns with that is how are you behaving? You talked about being proactive. You talk about having critical thinking. You talk about just thinking ahead. All of these things are behaviors, and this is a big part of performance management and how leadership sets the tone for that, right? So when you define those things, that if that is what you actually want, then you have to get people who would demonstrate that. What type of leader what type of employee would demonstrate all of those things. But in order to be effective within that leadership sphere, is you have to have a level of self-management and self-awareness to be able to be present with everything that you have just spoken about. And I think that is, I guess, to start the conversation, that is where I will leave it. But we could expand on that as we go along. What do you?
But
Yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
Tony, you made some strong points there, and I love it. Self-management and self-awareness. But do you believe it is easier said than done? Let's take, for example, one of the things that we see happens a lot. Many rising stars in business get into business, and upon examination as a professional, you recognize that it's a lot of emotional decision was made. The process of thinking ahead was not fully executed. Let's take, for example, in my experience in working with people, I don't know if that's you have similar experience. Many rising stars in business are not able to clearly define who is the ideal client. That's thinking ahead. Many rising stars in business are not able to clearly define the size of the market. That's thinking ahead. Many rising stars in business are not able to clearly identify the viability of the market. That's thinking ahead. I'm going to pause here for now. I can go through a whole list of things. But in your experience, do you find that rising stars in business really apply the tool of thinking ahead?
Not all of them. I think it's important. If you're a leader within a business, one of the key competencies that you need is to know the business.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know the business, how did you become a leader? And that would be my first question. So everything that you just spoke about is about knowing the business. And that is, you see, and this is why I always talk about performance management and competencies. You have to be competent at the competencies if you want to be a leader within the company, right? Does that make sense to you?
A lot of sense.
So the idea is, do the leaders know the business? Because if they know the business, those things are supposed to be covered, in my opinion.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of times we have people being promoted, like great salespeople being promoted into leadership. And yes, they will know the business to a certain extent, but they also need to know how to lead. But this is going to be something new for them. So it's all about cascading the competencies. For example, that is why we have to define them, because if you have defined certain competencies for employees and you promote them based on their demonstration of the competencies and the results they get, then they would be able to coach and mentor people below them because they know what is supposed to be demonstrated. Right? That is a must-have, and that doesn't happen. And where it doesn't happen is sometimes in government, where people are being, well, I'm not talking about all governments, but specific ones. Certain people are promoted only on seniority, and when you promote people on seniority, competence is missed.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry if I offended, but that is the way it is sometimes.
You've offended me. You have offended me. Tony, you've said a lot, and I do believe you have made some very, very strong points. I want to ask Elmore. I see Elmore is babysitting. Myself and Tony were just talking a bit about babysitting, but it's always good to see a father, at home, holding that young one, nurturing that young one, laying the pathway to leave the legacy. I love that. What are your thoughts on the topic so far, Elmore? I know that your area of specialty, you're a Bitcoin specialist. You are a cryptocurrency specialist. But where does leadership and performance management fit into your ecosystem? How important is leadership? How important is performance management?
It is the same, if not more, because what happens is that as I have gotten the opportunity to work with different projects that are within the cryptocurrency atmosphere, we all come pretty much from well, some of them come from corporate America, but some of them come from, being entrepreneurs outside of the cryptocurrency space that have, been in the space for so long that they have now embraced it and start to work inside of the space. So it's the same thing. The leadership has to be the same. If the leadership is not competent, it's not going to be able to lead the team to the successful land that they're looking for, especially when it comes down to like creating what is considered a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And so you still have to bring in the same level of leadership to the space, in everything else that comes with, managing, and to be able to have the vision, and to be able, to execute on what your vision is, and to be able to get the right team to do it. It's the very, very, very same thing. It's just that it's a different market, but we are still all working the same way. I have been, very, I would say lucky in this instance, just for the lack of a better word. But to be able to be in a team of people that we're working on creating multiple projects together, from getting off the ground zero to be able to, create, tailor education for white label companies, to be able to white label to other companies. And so that is,
Mhm.
within the realm. We still have to have the leadership. We still have timelines that we have to meet. We still have, the same sort
I
of,
agree. I agree.
conversation.
In your experience, Elmore, what I'm seeing is that over 75% of business startup fail in a very short period of time. In your experience in dealing with businesses, because I know you work with a lot of businesses, you provide mentorship, coaching, that type of support in your area of expertise to businesses. Um, but drawing from your experience, how much of these businesses fall through the crack because they did not think about the essential human resources to move the vision forward, or the essential capital resources, to move that business forward? They didn't, properly assess the cost of doing business. Um, how much of them did you see fall through the crack because they are not thinking ahead? What has your experience been like?
So from looking at the overall marketplace in the crypto space, this is something that you see happen very, very frequently, because this
Frequently.
is a space that is emerging, and so there is so many people giving it their shot in the space that many people come in with very little knowledge of how to make the whole entire project successful, and therefore you get to see them, go through the whole entire process of getting started, getting the hype, and then, not being able to execute on the vision. So you see that happening all the time because it's an emerging marketplace. So I do see it too often. But this is something that, when you are able to now understand what those little pieces are to be able to create a project that's going to become successful in this space, you have to start by looking at the team. Who is the team? What has the team done before? Are they experienced in this space? So many of the things that you guys are talking about just a little bit ago is the same thing that we're looking at when we're going to get involved, let's say, into like a pledge into a brand new project. To be able to pretty much start the seed of that project, we have to see all of those things happen in order for us to be able to feel at least a bit comfortable in the high risk that we're taking, because this is a complete brand new phase of that project that's just getting started. So yeah, so it's very very it's very much like any other company that would be from any other business, in any other market. It's just that this is all digital. So it just that's the only difference that I would say that takes place. Is just that everything is digital.
Thanks for that share, Elmore. I think it was a very in detailed response to the question. Uh, Tony, I want to throw this out. Elmore mentioned something which is risk. In our world, we understand what is risk and what is risk mitigation. And some essential aids in mitigating risk is, we can simplify it. How about the mentor? And me, back in the days, you have a mentor, you have a coach, you have a sponsor, you have a supportive community. Why do you think that type of risk management is not effectively deployed today? Do you think is a reason? Is it a disconnect with mentors and coach, or they're not enough? Mentor or coach are not visible enough, or is it because some might be saying there's a cost for to get a consultant like yourself in the field? Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's always a risk to try something new, but you have to. Look what happened to Kodak when they didn't want to go digital. Um, it's always something that we have to think about. We have to analyze the market. We have to, I think it was Shivani I was talking to a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about something called the TOES matrix. I don't know if you ever heard. You know the SWOT analysis?
Yeah.
Right.
Strength, opportunity, SWOT. Strength, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. Yes.
Right. So coming out of this, but the SWOT analysis is a planning tool.
It is.
The SWOT matrix, sometimes called TOES matrix, TOWS, SWOT spelled backwards. And the reason why they spelled it backwards is because we take the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we put it in a matrix. And you take the strengths would be here, and the opportunities here, and you put them together. So you have SO strategies. So what this TOES matrix does is that it takes the SWOT analysis and it plans actions. Every quadrant you will have actions. You take the S and the O and you put them together. You take the S and the T and you put them together. So what actions do you need to take to maximize your strengths and minimize your threats? What actions do you need to take to maximize your strengths to take advantage of the opportunities? So those are things like we could put on a matrix, and you will have 4 quadrants with just actions. And I think what happens is that a lot of companies don't know how to strategically plan their business. And when you use those tools to plan your business, then it reduces the risk. I'm not saying that it's going to eliminate the risk, but it certainly reduces it to a point where you are seeing the big picture, you are seeing the opportunities. If you even Google those matrix, you will see Starbucks come up. An example of the Starbucks TOES matrix. And you could see exactly, I imagine it's a simplified version of what really exists out there, but you could see the strengths and opportunities and the actions that they took to minimize whatever threats they may be facing. So it's a great tool to use. And there are several tools out there you could use to minimize risk. I mean, you just have to know how to use them. But risk is necessary. It's just that what are you going to do to minimize the downfall of what could happen with risk?
Yeah. I do believe a lot of the risk associated with doing business can be minimized when you do some of the things that yourself and Elmore is talking about. And I want to come back to it. What I see happen very often is that a young rising star may be able to think ahead. This is what I want to accomplish. And in thinking ahead, guess what? They recognize that they need human resource needs. They recognize that they need technical resource need. They recognize that they need capital resource needs. But the second part of it that I talk about a lot, which is seeing beyond these problems, they are not at that point where they're seeing beyond the problems. But guess what happens still, my friend? They still go ahead and start the process, knowingly that I don't have the right human resources, I don't have the right technical resources, I don't have the right enough capital resources to move the vision forward, but they start. That's a major risk. All right. And I think that all of these things, we have done the analysis and we are looking at why businesses fail. And these are some of the reasons why businesses fail. I am trusting that through these kind of conversation that we are having, we can help young rising stars and entrepreneurs generally to have a more clear idea in terms of how you go about the business process. I would say get the emotion out of the window, get it out. What you need is data. What you need is someone that can help you to distill that data into usable information that will help you to understand best practices and how to deploy those best practices to best achieve the business objective. Uh, because what I've seen, by simply doing that, by simply getting a mentor, I mean, you may not be the technical person who have the body of knowledge. Perhaps you don't need to. You're the visionary. But great visionaries surround themselves with bright minds. All right, mentors and coach. You know, a lot of great engineer, they may not be engineer by profession, but they're investors. You know, they have the capital to invest in the project. And I can recall, as I sit with family and sometimes, we talk, I would say, what leadership is? And I reflect on Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is one of the great minds behind management. All right, a great mind. And he said that there's a difference between the executive and the executor. And in most cases, you find the executive is also the executor. And he drew a distinction. He said the executive is the brain power. The executors is part of your strategic, tactical, and operational team that you're delegating responsibilities to. The executive is the visionary that says, this is what I want to accomplish, and I have the best people around me to achieve it. All right. So the executive may not necessarily be the subject matter expert in the field, in building a hospital, in managing a hospital, but the executive leader knows that this has tremendous income producing potential. And I want to invest here. And I'm going to surround myself with the best, brightest thinking persons that can help me manage these facilities. And all they do, invest and detach, go on to the next project. The difference between the executive and the executor. And I think it's so important for us to, as we mentor and coach rising stars in business, to really help them to get this. Elmer, I want to come back to you a little bit because on the point of money, on the point of wealth creation, I know that people can get trapped into this emotional decision-making process. There's a lot of fluff in the media that I can make lots of money if I invest in the cryptocurrency, in the Bitcoin. How would you advise someone who wants to make money via this platform to go about doing so? I'm happy today, Elmore, that we have ETF, Bitcoins, cryptocurrency. When I heard that, I was so excited because that to me is a risk mitigator without you having to do the heavy legwork behind mitigating risk in your investment portfolios. I would love to have your share of that. When I come back, I will be talking a little bit more with Tony about performance management. All to you, Tony. Elmore.
All right. Yes, no, definitely. So when it comes down to really explaining to the individual, or to have an individual that is wanting to learn about the space because they're very unsure, it depends on what the individual it's their mindset is. It depends. So it will be the type of knowledge that I will be able to give them, but in a very simple manner. The easiest way to be able to have someone to that is interested in the space, at least, right, is to give them the whole entire history of what has been going on. And it's very, once you are able to clear the path of what I will consider that path of resistance of the unknown, then the people become a little bit more sublime, and they become a little bit more tolerant to what you are advising them on. But in the space, it's super simple to see that the future is moving over to the blockchain, which is this called fact truth. And now we have different options as to whether you still want to remain in decentralized side of things, and then I'll start to provide them with the information of what that is going to look like. And then now we have this whole new entire type of currency out here that it's digitized, but it's also, it has its benefits as being, very borderless and being open and public and things of that sort. And so to be able to kind of put in the perspective as to what the future is going to look like, and then once the individual understand what the future is looking like, especially with then being able to see, because this is something else that I would bring to them, is what's currently going on, whether the fiduciary system, then their eyes get open very big, and they'll be like, okay, so now I can see that there is a difference here. And so we can start to create a plan, because if they want to invest in order for them to be able to make profit and then withdraw from the marketplace, that's a complete different conversation, versus that now we are going to get away from the fiduciary system, and we're going to start to implement this new currency for our business. And so that's a very, very different conversation for both of those individuals. And so to be able to kind of put it into a short side, because I don't want to extend it too long, is that for an individual that is looking to make the change because of what their currency and their country is falling apart to pieces, it's a complete different conversation there, because now we're trying to look for where are the safest areas to be able to park your money, so that way your money does not become dissolved and it does not become worthless. Because now we have that conversation. I have had this conversation with individuals from Argentina, to where now we're looking, how can we save your little bit of money that you still have left in the bank, because of the inflation rising so dramatically, it's becoming worthless. And so we definitely had that conversation in private, to where we started to look really, by me having the experience in the space for so long, and to be able to understand what everything is gearing towards to, and then we could start to look at different, if not just the one cryptocurrency that is changing the world as we know it today in a very, very big way. But we also look at other projects that are cryptocurrency projects, that they bring a solution to the marketplace. And so these are where we start to mitigate risk into this exposure for those type of projects, so that individuals are aware that this is, whether if you're going to get in for the short run or the long run, these are going to be your options. And here is what's taking place in the marketplace.
Right.
Here is what the whole entire emotional aspect of
Yeah.
it comes in, and that's essentially
Yeah.
how it
Elmore,
works.
yeah. Elmore, I want to put a question to you. I don't know if you have ever analyzed it. You just mentioned the fiat currency, which we know is a rapidly depreciating asset for multiple of reasons. The alternative that you are tabling is uh, cryptocurrency as an alternative um, uh, financial commodity. The question that I want to pose, I don't know if you have made this comparative analysis. What are the major differences in terms of how each of them depreciates um, in the market?
Interesting, because I've now that you put the question in that way.
Because I
So
know
there's
you might
only
say that the
one. There's
crypto,
only one
yeah.
that it has not, even though it's a volatile asset, it has not underperformed. So there's only one in the marketplace that is not going to lose its value per se.
So
The
that
rest has to
that
be
that
mitigated.
currency also increases in value based on the demand pull. The more demand you have for a particular token or a crypto, the value goes up. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The demand is surpassing the supply, it's definitely
Supply
going
and
to
demand
create a
influence
price
how that
going to
value
create a
is,
price
which is
trap.
which is a major difference in terms of currency.
It's going to come in very
The
slowly.
fiat.
It's coming in very slowly because it doesn't hit right away. So that's the past couple of months, the whole entire just Bitcoin marketplace, the demand on a daily basis since the ETFs were approved has been 10 times the amount that's being, and now even more because of the halving. But it was 10 times the amount of demand on the supply, and
So that is
it's really
massive
hard to get your hands
appreciation.
on it.
That is
Yes,
massive
so that's a store
appreciation,
of
and we
value.
hardly. I don't know the last day we actually saw that in fiat currency.
But
We
yeah,
don't see appreciation, we see depreciation based on
right. And that's
inflation.
something that's a huge point there that you just brought up that I always kind of picked on is that when you have a fiat currency, you see the depreciation in value. But when you get to see what this cryptocurrency is doing, it's appreciating in value instead of losing value. And it's only going to do so for the rest of its lifetime because of the
Okay.
scarcity of.
So the only people we need to watch is perhaps some of the players behind the financial instruments, like Sam
Well,
Bankman-Fried.
that's what
He
I have. That's what my expertise fall on. That's what I've been doing. I've been
Well, we
keeping an
have
eye
you
on
now,
all of
right, to
those
guide us
movements.
to guide the community with that. All right, thanks for your share, Elmore. On the financial aspect, I just want to talk very briefly about it. One of the things that I see happen a lot, and the reason we do these programs is because we really want to help people to start thinking different. We see that every year, either the beginning of the year or the end of the year, you set your goal, whether it's business or personal goals. You set those goals, and guess what happened? It falls through the crack again. We believe that if you deploy proactive leadership strategies, which is thinking ahead, which is thinking through the process, because thinking ahead doesn't necessarily mean in all cases you are thinking through the process. Tony, you've just mentioned a whole lot of tools that persons can deploy to ensure that they are making better business decision and better life decision. So the first half of this program, we look at leadership and how leadership can deploy to position you to come into either business or personal success. And of course, we're given high level overview. You can connect with any one of us, and we will be happy to do some more mentorship, some more coaching, so as to ensure that you are deploying the right tools to your business to minimize risk and optimize your chance for success. We believe that with the right information, your business, your life can be better. Tony, I want us to turn now to look a little bit at performance management. I have always listened to you speak so eloquently on the subject of performance management. And I know one of the terms that you use is what is performance management, and you refer to it as the employee life cycle management. Employee life cycle management. And I understand, I believe that that is a honest and authentic um, way of referring to it. But what I also find sometimes to the average person hearing that, it could still be abstract. So I want to ask you to just expand on your definition of what is performance management. But just before you do, I want to put myself in the hot seat and to share how I would relate to it. Performance management, to me, clearly established that you need to set clear goals. First of all, you need to have goals throughout the business ecosystem, not just marketing, not just public relation, not just finance, not just HR, the entire business ecosystem. So I call it setting objective and planning. That's one. I am taking those tools from perhaps what Peter Drucker might have talked about, because there are certain elements of management that you need to understand. So I see the first step is be clear about what you want to accomplish, and I know you will come with the rest. Know all the tools that you need to use to achieve the end result. But on to you, Tony.
Right. So what you were talking about, what you just spoke about is planning. And planning is a key component of performance management,
Of
of the
performance, yeah.
performance management process. But it's four, I mean, you could see different models, but my model, the model I use has four components. The first one is planning, then monitoring, then developing and reviewing. So with the planning process, when you plan your goals, we always say they're called SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. But we have to be careful with the A. The A, people always say it's achievable, but it really should be agreed upon. When people agree to what they have to achieve, there is more inspiration, there's more motivation to go after it. That is key. But it doesn't just include the goals. What is driving the goals? And something that we talked about continuously for the last couple of calls. What are the behaviors that are necessary, and have they been defined properly? That is the planning part, to make sure that everything is planned properly in terms of not only what we have to achieve, but how we are going to achieve it. What are the behaviors necessary? And then, what are the developmental actions for the individuals that you have to work on for the new financial year? Coming out of the last financial year, there would have been developmental goals for people. That is the planning part. With the monitoring part, this is where you see how you are doing. Now, again, I think I mentioned this before, is that a lot of companies are moving away from this once a year appraisal, performance appraisal system. They're moving now to having more regular conversations with individuals so you know how they are performing at every step of the way within the year. Then we come to the developing. During the year, you always have to be given feedback. You have to have conversations, performance conversations, expectations conversations, coaching, feedback, all of the things that develop people and create the right environment from leaders. Remember, I told you before, leaders set the tone. And when we define those behaviors and competencies at the beginning of the financial year, that is what creates the culture. Because when people say they have a toxic culture or whatever kind of culture they want to define it as, it is how people are interacting and how they are behaving. That is where the culture comes from. So then when you review, let's look at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, how did we do? And what is it that we need to improve on going forward to the new financial year? And the whole process starts over again. But one last point before I finish on the performance management structure. Performance management doesn't exist in a vacuum. Performance management is tied to the strategic plan of the organization. Remember, organizations have mission, they have a vision, they have core values. In order for those values to be represented properly, whether it's in the external environment, what do you want your customers to see you as? What do you want your employees to see you as? Those are the things that are internal beliefs. What do we have to have? What kind of culture do we want? The competencies and behaviors is what drives that. And I know we spoke about this at length before. So that is just to wrap up my part here.
Well, Tony, I must say I love everything that you said. But of course, we always like looking at gaps, right?
Yes.
We always like looking at what the
Tell me what the gap is. Tell me what the gap is. I will help you out.
No, I love everything that you said. This is not necessarily about you, but what I've seen, I'm going to share some general, thoughts on my experience. Very often we have a powerful thesis. I'm going to say a powerful thesis. That looks at the corporate culture, looks at setting the objective, look at planning, look at the coaching, the mentorship to ensure that you can optimize performance. But then recently, I was talking with a food and nutrition specialist and a health and wellness specialist. And when you sit with them and you start to really interpret where they're at and all that they're saying and how it ties into performance, you are like, oh my God, that was a completely missing area that I'm looking at. Because I think very often what happened, Tony, we have a good thesis and we say to ourselves, the thesis is all it takes to achieve predictable outcome, achieve targeted performance outcome. But guess what? We are leveraging what we call a universal tool to help individual to achieve specific performance. And the universal tool very often cannot be applied individually. Meaning that if we are looking to enhance performance of people, and there's no one in the organization that is looking at health and wellness, like for example, how does the sleep-wake cycle affects your performance? Because there's something that we call the melatonin, which is the nighttime neurotransmitters, which translate into serotonin, which is the daytime neurotransmitter. And that's the energy and the adrenaline and where everything is going to come from. And if there is no focus on that, your staff might be sleeping late. All right. So it's going to affect performance, but performance management in its thesis didn't look at that. Your staff might be eating the wrong food, but they don't know because they don't have a dietitian. So they are having all of these chemical imbalances affecting how they perform, but the thesis didn't look at that. So when I say gap, from the research and studies that we are doing, we see all of these things as affecting the desired outcome that the corporate leaders want. And that's blindsided. Very often it's a blind spot. How do you see that? I'm going to come to Elmore, but Tony, how do you see that?
All right. Remember when I mentioned the conversations?
Yeah.
Remember when I mentioned the well-being conversations? That is one of the conversations that leaders need to have with their employees. How are you doing personally? And remember we talked about coaching as well. Sometimes companies bring external coaching to coach different leaders or employees because sometimes leaders don't have the time. External coaches brings the life coaching aspect into the picture. That is for companies who care about the well-being of their employees. Some companies just want to get the work done and they don't have time to, you sort yourself out.
And they shoot themselves in the leg of the process because they order my performance, but you do that. The very same thing you want to accomplish,
Exactly. Now, I have no way to measure adrenaline and serotonin. We have no KPIs we could put for that. But the idea is that we need to have the conversations outside of financial performance when we are working with employees. I mean, within employees, I remember when I was in pharmaceutical, just an example. Our boss at the beginning of every financial year, he used to say, write down one personal goal that we are going to attach to your performance. One personal goal that you have. Some people had, to be more healthy, to lose weight, to, go on a cruise or whatever their personal goal is. And we used to talk about it. Not like a formal conversation, but just talk about it during the year. Let's see how we're doing with the personal goals to make sure that everybody's sort of in line with keeping that work-life balance, as some people like to call it. I mean, I tend not to talk about that too much, but the idea is that is where you have to make the choice as a leaders to have those conversations with your employees. Yes, it's true. A lot of companies don't address health-related issues, but some do. Some of them do.
All right. You mentioned something, and I just want to talk about it a little bit, and then I want to come back to emotional intelligence. I'm going to ask Elmore to, well, let me put it this way. I'm going to leave you to think about it a little bit, Elmore. Sometimes we hear in leadership and in performance management, leave your challenge behind. Don't bring it to the workforce. All right. I want to have your thoughts on this, Elmore, because I do believe it is almost a practical impossibility for your team leader to be going through some emotional trauma and show up and perform at their best. And if we are not seeing that as a leader who wants performance management, I believe it is outside of the boundaries of emotional intelligence. So Elmore, think about it. I'm coming to you, Sister, but Tony, you said something just so I just want to talk about it a little bit. Sure. Because I recognize that there's a lot of talk today about, I heard one person say there's no such thing as work-life balance. I disagree. I disagree because let me tell you why. We have coined the term the 20/80 rule. And why did we term the term 20/80 rule? Because it comes somewhat back to Peter Drucker. There's a major difference between the executive and the executive. As the executive, who is a global thinker, social actor, transformational leader, guess what? You don't want to sit down and micromanage the whole process. You want to focus on the 20%, which might be your capital, and you want to delegate the 80% to competent people that can get the job done. So guess what? I'm delegating the 80%. I have a CEO, I have a CFO, I have all of that. And I don't want to do the job because I got competent people. And I got someone that's going to evaluate that process. So I got all the balance that I want. I got time for family, time to travel, time to see the world, time to go, look at new possibilities. So in this context, you need work-life balance, if even is to find your time to grow and scale your vision. If you're so consumed in what you're doing all the time and you don't understand the power of delegation, you don't have the power of delegation, it's good and bad. So I just want to put that out there based on the thesis that we have developed. So the next time you say some people say, well, you said they got work-life balance. Tony, you also said something else just before I come to Elmore. And I really want you to chime in on, after Elmore would have speak about the very same question and how you see it as a specialist on emotional intelligence. Are executive leaders detached emotionally to say things like that, leave your issue out, knowing for a fact that is not everybody has that level of maturity to do that? Elmore, all to you. What are your thoughts on that old, rosy fluffy saying, leave the problem behind? Don't
No,
bring it to the work.
no, you hit home because there's one of our teammates that is currently going through a life crisis, right? And we need him to perform and to stick with the team, but because of life, right, happens, we have to be able to manage that, right? For us, it has become because we have a different train mindset to where we are in the caring industry, right? We want to care for people. We want to have a company that it's always able to care for its team members. And so we have this situation right now to where this individual is not able to perform. And so what we have decided was to be able to give him some space for him to figure out his life's issues that he's got going on, so that he can get back to us refreshed. Now, this is from being in a team perspective, to where everybody is bringing something to the ecosystem to work with side of the company. Now, when we're dealing with the individuals that we have that are now considered employees, we have to be able to bring the same exact care, because if we don't know our people in our team, we are not able, as a leader, and this is from my perspective, we're not able to identify the weakest link. And when you as a leader is not able to identify the weakest link in the group, well, that is essentially a ingredient that is going to cause failure in the ecosystem, because you are only going, that saying that you are only as strong as your weakest link. It is true. I have seen companies that have fallen apart because of that weak link just happened to snap open. And that could be somebody in the financial side, that could be somebody that's in the management side, that could be somebody that's doing the receptionist side, that it's a very individual that has come very valuable to the whole entire company. And because of the lack of leadership in the space, and this is not able to be identified, and therefore you see it. I mean, I see it all the time. I see it all the time. So where, because of the lack of noticing where your weakest links are inside of your company, that your company could fall apart at any given moment. So providing that time, and to provide the care, and to provide the attention, which is what makes everyone else feel like they're valuable, it's, I think, something that is lacking for companies that do fail, because that's exactly what we see all the time. So
Great
Yeah.
point. Great point,
one more
Elmore.
thing, one more thing.
Okay.
The environment that you create, the habits that you want to create in your company, you have to be able to set those from the very beginning and never deviate from those.
That's very right. Very right.
Great point. I'm coming to you shortly, Tony, but I love what Elmore said. And I just want to just drop another nugget here. What we have seen is that some of the top 100 companies, top 500 companies that brings empathy to the workplace, they are not in doing that appraisal and doing exit interviews because persons exit the organization. You want to capture all of that data, why they're exiting. Some person may say, I'm exiting because the daycare closed at this time and I got to get my kid at this time. And, your work time is not permitting me. So they have learned from all these things and what they have basically done. In some of these organizations, you have daycare. But from the time I said daycare, I know a lot of businesses are going to say that's a expenditure that I don't need to be thinking about. And this is, again, is one of the reasons I said, if your strategic team is built out well, what the average person sees as a liability, as a cost, guess what? With the right financial mind on your side, we can swing that into performing assets. I just want to say that because we may be saying some things here that the average person in business might say, you're telling us how to spend more. Not necessarily so. It depends on what lens you're seeing it through. But Tony, I want to come now to you. You're an expert in emotional intelligence. How important is emotional intelligence in building that rapport with the staff, optimizing their performance? I really want to get you to chime in here.
Right. So I want to go back to what Elmo was saying about individuals and some of the issues that people have. Remember what we said before, that emotional intelligence, self-awareness is the most important element of it. And there's a great tool called the Big Five. And the Big Five measures personality traits. Because one of the things with self-awareness is that if you lack it, you will not know what you have to improve. And that is the worst place.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. And the Big Five, what the Big Five does is a questionnaire, and there's a version of it on truity.com that you could do for free. And it measures 5 core characteristics of personality. The first one is openness. How open are you to experience? Then there's conscientiousness. How likely are you to get work done? Then there's extroversion. There's agreeableness, and agreeable people tend to be very much into maintaining relationships. And then there's neuroticism. Neuroticism are those people who are very prone to stress, have high anxiety and that type of thing. So for example, if somebody is very high in neuroticism and very low in conscientiousness, run. Because those people are going to be extremely difficult to deal with.
To get along with. Okay.
So in my case, I was very high in conscientiousness, but also high in agreeableness. I want to get things done, but I want everybody to get along. And that is a source of stress for me. So we have to look. So for example, knowing my Big Five personality traits, I was able to say, well, I need to develop my level of assertiveness because it will drop my agreeableness down a bit. Because you will find that a lot of leaders and companies are very disagreeable people. They will tell you no when they have to, be assertive when they have to, and that is what makes them stronger. Right? So you have that gives you a good idea of what your profile is and what you need to adjust within your profile. So emotional intelligence, yes, it's for leaders as well as everybody else. It's very, very important. We have to learn how to be aware not only of how we show up, but how do we interact with the people around us? Because you create an environment around you. If you're a pushover, people will push you over. That is just the nature of life. Who are you blaming? Who are you blaming if you're a pushover? Somebody everybody else? No, you have to blame yourself. You have to strengthen yourself in order to just to survive in this world.
Let me just share an observation as we're going to wrap up shortly. But what I've seen in leadership, one method of leadership is inadequate to manage any organization. And I say so, I don't know what's your experience because we are dealing with so many different personality types. Some may want to say emotional intelligence is being too soft. You have to use some autocratic leadership here. Can we blend the two? Can we blend autocratic and emotional intelligence from your experience?
Hello,
This
did you
is
hear
for
me?
Tony. Yeah, not Tony. Yeah. Do you think we can, in your experience, have you seen it worked? Where because in most cases you find autocratic leader there like saying this has to be done, get it done at this time.
Right, and that is
You pro-
required sometimes. That is required
yeah,
sometimes. The ability to be assertive and be autocratic is not about being autocratic all of the time. You have to choose when to do that. You have to be capable of it. You have to be capable of being.
that's self-aware. That's where the self-awareness comes in.
You don't have to use it all the time, but you have to be able to use it when
And
it is required.
self-aware, self-control. Love it.
It's like
Love
if I was running a country, and I had a nuclear weapon, would you attack me? Probably not.
it. Well,
But
I'm gonna start running it. I'm gonna start a run if I fit into the if I do the person fit into the category you just described.
I don't want to use it. I don't want to use it, but I want you to know that I have it. That is all.
Got you. Got you. Something that's all it takes to exercise control.
So
I
that is
love
where
it.
being
Okay.
autocratic comes in. You have to be that like that sometimes. But the idea is
Okay.
don't be like that all the time. Because if you're like that all the time, then there's a problem with your culture.
Great. All right, Elmore, I'm going to come to you for your closing remarks, and then I'm going to come back to Tony. For those who are looking at the program, I want to thank you. Today, we are reaching over 50 countries, and we have over 40,000 persons who have subscribed to our platform over the last few months. Thank you from the depths of my heart. In the event that you are meeting Elmore for the first time, you don't know who is Elmore. Well, he is a specialist in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and he's about to release one of his new books on that platform. With that being said, I want to give Elmore now a chance to share your last thoughts and give your closing remarks on today's topic. All to you, Elmore.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity, and yes, so as you just said, this book that I have that is coming out called Crypto 101: Understanding the Future of Money. It's definitely a good read to be able to capture the essence of what it is that we have been dealing with today, that we are operating it without knowledge, to come into an understanding into what the future starts to look like, and then to start to understand a bit of this digital world that is coming right around us. And then on top of that, just to kind of close off, having all of these experiences with many individuals from all over the world, to kind of having objectives, and then having people that are interested, and being I have been able to hear many of these objections, which are very interesting, because of everyone's point of view is different, and you have to respect everyone's perspective. However, when you are going to be a voice of guidance into this world, that you have to be able to do it in a way that is very delicate, and that you're not really going to be attempting to break this huge belief system that this individual have. If not, what you want to attract them to is to see this new truth that's sitting in front of them, that they were unaware of before now. And so this is something that has allowed me to help individuals, throughout the whole entire, I would say, Western Hemisphere. And it has been quite rewarding, and I do, appreciate everyone that it's able to take value of the words that I have been able to provide for the individuals out here. And as to the topic of what we're talking about in leadership and managing, this is something that I have become at the very beginning stages of me starting the entrepreneurship. And this is something that I became very obsessed about, was because I remember that the first businesses that I opened, they fell apart to shambles, and I was trying to figure out the reason why I couldn't get it right. And then I ran into self-development and leaderships, and then systems, and then everything else that goes along with running a business in the right way. And so it has definitely paid off, I would say, at this time, from all of those years. and it's definitely a subject that I always enjoy discussing, because even today we are seeing that the new generation that's coming up, we are able to right away tell which ones are going to be the winners, and most likely which ones are going to start to have some losses or some learning curves before they become a star. And that's why we're here, to be able to provide that consult and to be able to provide that information, so that everyone, it's not going to go to the hard process. If not, they're able to capture the information and apply it, and not have to endure a hard time.
All right, thanks for that share, Elmore. And of course, in Habits and Money, we talk everything business, we talk everything money. And Elmore's role is to really help you to make smarter, better decision when it comes to investment portfolio in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space. And that's why he's writing this book. Sometimes we allow fear and lack of information to hold us hostage. And I do believe as educated people, we should not swim in fear. We owe it to ourselves to get the right information so we can make better business and better life choices. We are only here to educate, to ensure that you are not trapped in fear, but you're able to listen to different point of view, distill it, make your own decision, and be smarter and wiser in business and in life. Tony, I now want to come to you to give your last statements and your closing remarks on today's topic, which is leadership and performance management. All to you, my friend.
Good. And congratulations on your book, Elma.
Thank
And
you.
one of the things I want to just end with is that when it comes to leadership and performance management, we have to remember that nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything exists together. The leaders have to be tied to performance management. Performance management has to be tied to your strategy. Everything relates to each other. And when there's misalignment with any one of them, then we're going to have some issues that we have to talk about. But in the meantime, when we talk about that leadership and the value of emotional intelligence within leadership and within performance management, everything could be aligned, and we get more productivity that way.
All right. Thanks for that share, my friend. And there you had it. Today we had a very animated conversation about leadership and also about performance management. So I trust that you had some notes to take away from. I want to thank Elmore for always showing up and provided information that I believe can help people to make smarter, wiser life choices and business choices. I know that a lot that he's talking about, depending on where you are in the world, can sound like a foreign language. And I must admit, years ago, when I heard Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, it was, you know, I was perhaps the most uncomfortable person in the room. But I can tell you, I've been in rooms with some gurus on the subject matter, with some highly influential people who are sitting on the UN, and they're there articulating, discussing this topic. And I'm happy, that we would have met with Elmore, who is also a subject matter expert in the field. I must also say it's a tremendous pleasure to be talking with Tony. Uh, what I like about Tony is that he is dealing with some critical subject matters, emotional intelligence. And I must say, since I've been talking with Tony, I myself have become a little bit more emotionally intelligent in terms of how I lead. And he also focused a lot on performance management. And I do believe that if you want to be successful in business and in life, it is so important to learn and harness the tools that Tony is talking about, because sometimes in life you can be so insensitive. Your focus is to make money, and your focus is me, myself, and I. But with that type of attitude, guess what? You're going to be mashing toes. You're going to be pulling people down. And you need to be sensitive, emotionally awake to how those actions is affecting your relationship with people. That can undermine your effort to attain success. This can happen at a personal level. It can also happen at a corporate level. So I really love that we have you, an expert, to really help us to get that clearer vision of what emotional intelligence is, first of all, and how to deploy this in our life and in the organization. So, Tony, I want to thank you again for being here, and always great to have you and to share on these topics. I want to
Thanks,
encourage
Gary.
the audience. Welcome, my friend. I want to encourage the audience to be here next week, Saturday again. We do this Saturday every day every Saturday from 3 to about 4:15. So I want to encourage you to join us next week, Saturday, for another broadcast of Habits and Money. With that being said, I want to say hello to my audience. Have a great rest of the weekend. And to Elmore and Tony, always great having you, my friends.